Let's just start with the champions, since obviously that's a spicy topic, because quite frankly, I have to start here, Maniac, which is, since they won the tournament, and now they've gotten the Flames, I call him Flames, by the way. I know it's like a mixed bag, people call him Flames E or Flames. I'm just calling him Flames. I pick one at the beginning and I try to stick with it.
Pick a line.
Like Ziwu. And basically, now that they've won an event with him, right, part of it, obviously, now that they've won, means people are going to then also add in the championships with Dupree, etc. So the question becomes, to Maniac, notice how I phrased that, to Maniac specifically, does this mean Vitality is number one? Mm-hmm. Would they be number one for you right now? Does this win do it for them?
Yeah, I think it does. Because on the way to the trophy, you beat both G2 and ENCE, which to me as the greatest rivals for this competition, right? I'll be just a little bit careful in the sense that I think the comeback on Mirage on the third map of G2 is sort of...
We'll definitely get into that, don't worry.
It's astronomical, right? It's astronomical. And so we all have a tendency to, like, in hindsight, pretend like, oh yeah, Vitality was a better team at the event. I mean, they could have been eliminated a million times on that Mirage game. But since they've actually made it, since they've actually had that comeback, they pushed G2, they beat them in 3 maps, and then they do the same to ENCE, which had beaten them as well in Cologne. I think right now, and also considering that Heroic is once again showing very clear signs of mental fragility, I think this is a legitimate claim. It's not the strongest, and I don't think the debate is close, but I think it's a legitimate claim to the number one spot when it comes to Vitality,
Yeah, for me, the interesting part about where we're at is it's not too dissimilar to earlier in the year when you had that mixture of like when Vitality was starting to come on strong, and then you had like Heroic was still really consistent. You had FaZe could maybe win an event out of nowhere. G2 had won events out of nowhere. And it was more like basically before each tournament, you're almost just asking someone, what are your personal, like which players do you like and what style do you like when you ask who is the number one team, because there wasn't a clear number one. And in fact, I even think there are parallels here that we can mirror. Like, for example, one thing we're going to get into in a minute when we talk about them is ENCE is just starting to look like they're the new Heroic as Heroic falls off. Like, they've got all the same qualities. Like, they look so awesome right up to a certain point. Then they don't win the big match. And then they don't have like the superstar player who turns up and takes over. So there's a lot of similarities there, but I can see why some people, for example, are saying that ENCE is number one, because if you want to go on pure aggregate and look at, how they do in most games in the field, they are an excellent team. They have impressed a lot of people. I'm kind of with you though. If I actually had like gun to my head, like I die if I pick the wrong team that wins the next tournament, I would pick Vitality as the team to win it. But there's another reason why though, which is I still think they've got a lot of flaws in this version of the lineup that they haven't like fixed compared to where they were at with the Dupree lineup. Like, that's actually why that gamble to me was a big gamble. And I never blamed them for doing the gamble. It was more just I didn't know Flames was the player I would replace. But the reason why I don't blame them is I also do think it could have been fool's gold to keep with the last lineup because it looked like it had sort of plateaued. It was a very good team, but it had also plateaued. I don't think they could have got any. There's nothing more to get out of the team, if you know what I mean. Like, Spinks was excellent. Ziwu was the best player. Magisk was playing awesome. Like, what more can you get there? It's not like Apex is actually going to like double his fragging. It's not like, Dupree's game was, we already know what it was. Like, we saw the heights of it and we saw that it couldn't go too much further. So to me, it was a good gamble to make. Now it's paid off because they've gotten the first title win and they've even had good runs in general. But the key thing for me is, I always have a principle, which is if it's like all conditions are similar or equal, like we both have a good map pool, we're both championship material, we're both like teams that, you win a map, I win a map, then nearly always the factor for me when I'm being biased and picking who I will win is who has the best superstar player. Because if you have the best superstar player in Counter-Strike, I know a lot of players, funnily enough, hate this sort of thinking. They don't think you should have superstars. They don't think there are stars. Like, I'm pretty sure the best examples of teams like this are the teams that were very balanced, like the Fnatic 2015 or Astralis. You go talk to them, they'll be like thinking I'm like one of these like American TV personalities making a fake story. To them, it's like you shouldn't say Device is the superstar. It should be like, look, we've got like, look, dude, we've got Magisk over here on CT, and then we've got Dupree when he's on T side, and then if Device has to, sure he does just the other. Same way in Fnatic. I mean, Flusher just retired recently. I'm sure someone like Flusher doesn't really vibe that I'd say Olaf Meister was the best. To him, it's like, do you see me at Majors? Like, what? I was carrying all the clutches when I'm pretty good to. If you're Crims, you can go, excuse me, can I get in on this convoy? You know what I mean? Like, these are all mega players, but the problem with that thinking is this: in a general team game, they have a point. There are roles you play. There is a level of balance. But here's the difference. the reason I think certain players are superstars and certain players are just very good players, and this is why I would make the distinction between a prime Olaf and a prime Flusher, is to me, someone like a Flusher has a good game when the circumstances align, when he's in the right half, he's having feelings. Someone like a prime Olaf or whatever the superstar player is, they sometimes just have to have a good game. There's no choice. It's like when we get later, if we talk about the Ziwu topic, the problem is, it's not that you're even playing bad if you just lose a game and you play average. That's where we do expect you to sort of do the Superman and go into a telephone box, come out and just save the day, no matter what's happening in the game. It's one of the reasons, by the way, why I actually do downplay Huxley a little bit. I've just seen too many games where Nico dropped like 35 kills, and it's like, I know Huxley ain't telling him to do that, mate. No one could tell him to do that. Like, that's just where your superstar pulls you out of the fire and it allows you to get wins that, if you're snappy, you don't have that play, mate. You just have to lose that game and then go, oh, well, back to the drawing board. So, to me, the Ziwu factor is a significant one. And crucially, as you saw at this tournament, dude, if you're a Vitality fan, the future looks very promising. Because right now, like, Spinks doesn't put up gaudy numbers over whole tournaments, but mate, especially in a match, he can be extremely good. And I actually think his, like, eye test really checks out. Like, this is another bona fide, like, this isn't the 2019 Vitality or the 2021 one where everyone was like, it's just Ziwu all day. No, they have other players here. And then, mate, Flames, we already know his aim's good. And then Magus, like, as always, just chills, mate. He's just humming in the background, and he'll always give you those big games when you need him. So I actually think, like, the raw, like, even though it's only one player change, you can see, like, now the difference is this isn't even their peak level, mate. They don't even look like, I said, like they've cleaned everything up. They've got plenty of holes. There's things we could go into the map pool. There's all sorts of problems. But yeah, if this is what, like, the sort of, like, I'll be real, I think that was like 8 out of 10 Vitality that won that event. So when I even think Ziwu didn't play that great. It's actually one of his, like, not as great MVPs, quite frankly. If you can win like that, that's the difference. Old Vitality couldn't win like this, mate. They had to have Ziwu have, like, all-time great performance, probably, like, insane calling. Maybe the coach does an awesome job. They already stay in their map pool. Like, this was, as much as it was flawed, that makes it very promising to me. This actually makes me think the ceiling for this team is very high. So I would take them number one. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you're making a whole lot of good points. I think being able to get a W in that way in Riyadh, knowing the kind of issues they still have with the lineup, tells a whole lot about, like, what kind of deep power we're working with. Like, you mentioned the map. Let's be clear. At this time, Anubis and Vertigo is an insta-loss. They haven't gotten to the point. They haven't gotten to the point where you could see Flames, and I'm sure you can look at the numbers and they'll reflect the same reality. He's very uncomfortable in his position. It's going to take him a little bit of time to warm up on the CT side. They still are able to stomach it in a best of 3 where they lose this map pick, and anyway, they win best of 3, the whole thing. So that in itself, huge. Far from being completely refined in terms of protocols, but still mentally very much in the game. Like, think about some of the scenarios that we've played out. There's, of course, the incredible G2 comeback on map number 3, but there's also the technical issue that happened against ENCE halfway through the second map, where they lost the first one, they stay in it, they win the second map. So some of these elements are really crucial, I think, if you want to have a team that establishes itself as a top. They have it. I also think that, as you say, the floor overall of the team is much higher now. Because, sure, Apex is always going to have numbers that are deep in the red. I think it's almost unavoidable. If he has a good game here and there, you take it, you cash your chip at the casino and you leave. But when you think that Flames, Magisk, or Spinks can be your worst fourth rifle, it's a golden situation to be in.
Yes.
Magisk is probably still criminally underrated in what he does in some of his roles. Like, in CT side, is one of the strongest anchors that we have in the game. So huge stats on the T side as well. And I agree with you. You look at Zywoo's numbers on the whole event, they're not great by his standards. Like, we're not talking about peak performances, but I think it mattered a whole lot to him that he was able to show up at the end and have that kind of impact, which remains a point of entry if you want to criticize Zywoo and you want to temper down what he's doing. I think for him to be able to lift himself up from a average event, I'm going to use these terms carefully, but average event.
Relative to his form, obviously, yes.
Relative to his form, average event, and then suddenly map 3, just fucking catching on fire, historical comeback, and then again in the grand final, 134 rating, just straight up superstarring. So yes, there's depth from coast to coast now on the lineup. And even when we are far from a finished product, it is already a team that can win. When they made the change, my prediction that I made in a couple of interviews was that I thought Vitality would never fall below the top 4. I didn't think they would be so high so quick. I thought the hit would be a bit harder to stomach. It would take them a little bit of time. But you're also right. When you compare Flames to Dupree, I think the mistake is to do a 1-to-1 in the now and then. That's a mistake. You're not doing a 1-to-1 in now and then. You're doing a 1-to-1 in 6 months. And you can imagine what Flames can become, and then suddenly, yes, this definitely very strong candidate, because also they've shown that compared to the Vitality of yesteryear, that's a team now that's ready to play the big games, like semifinals, finals. They're going at it. They might not win it, but they don't disappear. They don't just completely liquidify in the game and let it go by, as it had happened to Vitality early in the year. I don't know, like the Liquid game in Katowice, the Ends game in Pro League. This isn't happening anymore. So the lights are looking real green for Vitality, and I just hope that they maintain like a work ethic and they stay motivated. That's sometimes the one risk when you feel like you're already kind of at the top. Other than that, it's looking real good.
Yeah, actually, the way you said it there, it's a bit how I always frame it for G2, for like how crazy their lineup is. It's like, mate, if JKS is the second worst player, we've got a pretty insane lineup. Like, so yeah, same thing. If you make it, like, you can pick which. If you think either Flames or Magisk is the like worst non-IGL player, then you can see the sort of talent we're working with. That's why I say the one narrative I will not allow to endure into this era of Vitality is I don't want to hear any of those stories, which at one time were justified, of like ZywOo doesn't have enough help. Now, here's the problem. It was always a bit of a crap storyline because they just meant like the stats show no one else frags out. So I would agree he didn't have like firepower help, but the problem is some of those lineups even like, mate, that original Vitality lineup was like the mega veterans who were all like geniuses at playing big games. Like, so it was never quite true, but it was in the sense like he had to put numbers up, he had to produce, or they could not win. Whereas as I say here, there was even games where essentially, and this seems impossible if you're a ZywOo fan, because it never happened before, he actually got carried at times. He like the game you'll talk about against G2. The rest of his team kept him in it, and then he took over an OT. In fact,
to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content, well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.